Good morning again, friends, guests, and supporters of inclusion. And thank you, Auntie Deborah, for your generous welcome to country, and to the children from the Summer Hills Children's Centre. What a beautiful, heartwarming welcome to country as well. And I too would like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we gather, the Gadigal and Wangal people of the Eora Nation. I pay my respect to your elders who have come before, those who are here today, and those elders who are yet to emerge. And can I acknowledge also other speakers today here and panellists, Ethnic Communities Services Cooperative, Children's Services Central and Community Childcare Cooperative for your work in fostering social cohesion and inclusion, and of course for inviting me to address today's conference, Celebrating Diversity Keys to Inclusive Practice. Now that we've got this out of the way, inclusion. This is a word that anybody and everybody who's interested or involved in social policy or is working with diverse communities talks about and strives to achieve. There's no universally accepted definition of inclusion. Still, there is many on offer in this country, and universally as well, which generally accept that inclusion means inviting those who have been historically locked out to come in, to learn, to play, to secure a job, to access services, to connect with others, and to have their voices heard. However, as soon as we get into definitions of inclusion, a range of exclusion questions arise, like who has the right, who has the authority or right to invite others, and how did the inviters get in, and who is doing the excluding. So I want to say at the outset that inclusion is a practice, not a concept. It's a practice that recognises and accepts that we are all born in. It definitely becomes our responsibility as change makers to remove all barriers which uphold exclusion, since none of us has the authority to invite others in. Inclusion is a topic that's very close to my heart. Inclusion is a precondition for the growth and development of full and healthy human beings. It's at the core of what I do and the way I live my life. I think Monica introduced me very well, but I'm going to repeat them because they're part of my speech. So a little bit about me and my work and why inclusion matters to me. I've been an advocate and an activist in the social welfare and human rights field for some time. Actually, Monica said close to 2 decades. It's actually close to 30 years, almost 30 years. I've worked in mainstream with migrants, with people from all walks of life and all ages. I've worked with women and men, with young people and children. In fact, in the earlier days of my career, I worked in children's services. I was very young at the time. I've led a number of organisations, projects and campaigns within and outside the Arab community. I've advocated and continue to do so for the rights of vulnerable groups and always for inclusion and social justice. And in both the means and ends of my work, I'm dedicated to co-creating a world in which everyone is included and supported with no one left out. I've been with Arab Council Australia for quite some time. We're a secular community-based organisation working to bring about positive social change and improve the lives of the most vulnerable people in the community. We represent the interests of Australians from 22 Arab countries. As an organisation, we are steadfast in working inclusively across diversity and in forging strong collaborative practices. We see these reflected in our membership, which is open to everyone, and you all could join today if you like, not just those of Arab background. We see it amongst our staff, our board, with our projects and our services. We see it in our partnerships and collaborative work with others. We've led initiatives that bring people who are locked out of our community into the centre, such as our work with LGBTI and combating homophobia within the Arab community. We've led coalitions that brought unlikely partners together, such as the Sydney Alliance. And together with diverse groups, including the Jewish community, we successfully campaigned against the then proposed changes to the Racial Discrimination Act. We see our inclusive practices over recent years when we developed and implemented a very successful place-based project called Linked in Bankstown, which brought sectors together to expand the collaborative practice in the community. Now, while my organisations could be considered exclusive because it's ethnic specific, we have a vision of diversity. We believe that the criterion for inclusion is breathing, not IQ, income, colour, ability, race, ethnicity, gender identity, sexual orientation, religion or language. We believe that inclusion is recognising our universal oneness and interdependence, that we are one even though we are not the same. And here I acknowledge that there is a great deal of excellent work and numerous fine examples of inclusive practices undertaken by many organisations, by early childhood groups, institutions and others around the country. And as a society, we've come a long way in recognising and valuing people that have been historically marginalised. We have social policies and laws that protect freedoms and encourage social cohesion. The cultural diversity of Australia's people is a great resource of our nation's strength. The Australian multiculturalism is a success story, a multiculturalism admired around the world and endorsed by 85% of Australians who believe that it is good for the country. Yet despite all this good work, people whose abilities and identities are regularly denied and ignored feel that society is not honouring their right to participate in a full way. Communities, groups and people still feel excluded, locked out and even demonised. Which leads me to the inclusion's evil twin, exclusion. Exclusion is the precondition for misery, loneliness and trouble. Exclusion occurs in many forms and racism is right up there. Take our experience as a community. We've been at the receiving end of discrimination, bigotry and demonising narrative for decades, but more so now. Our community as a collective has been fashioned as the enemy within. And while living and breathing human beings, families, young people, women and children have become faceless in the process and are being profoundly impacted on a daily basis. Now, I'm going to give you a couple of examples of what I'm talking about, actual real-life examples. A driver of a major store went about his day delivering furniture. This driver arrived to a household in Sydney on the nominated date, but the customer was not home. So he took a photo on his mobile phone, as was required of him by his employer, as proof that he had been there before, that he had been to that house. And he then continued on to his next assignment. In the meantime, the store received a call from this same customer who appeared to have been home all along. The customer yelled abuses at the store manager, saying, "How dare you send an Arab to deliver the furniture? And don't you know these people are terrorists? And this man was taking photos of my house. Don't you know what happened in Martin Place?" And more sentiments, more racist sentiments along these lines. Now, the store resolved the situation very nicely. They politely told the customer that he was being racist, that they don't want his business, and gave him a refund. The driver was absolutely devastated, and so was I. There he was, going about his everyday life to put food on the table for his family, only to have his livelihood jeopardised because of sentiment of hate towards his race. Now, another example of racism in a different form. On my first day back to the office after the Christmas break, earlier this year, like in January, I think, I received an anonymous handwritten letter to my organisation. The writer goes on to details of how she or he is afraid of Arabs and is threatened by the immediate sight of an Arab. This person accuses us that we're not doing enough to reassure the broader community and that we should condemn terrorism and hold a public meeting at Town Hall where people from the broader community could air their feelings. The writer concludes with 2 additional points. I will not want my 17-month-old daughter to associate with a person from an Arab descent, and I'm not going to sign this letter because I'm worried about a fatwa on my head. Now, frankly, even after so many months, I have no idea what a fatwa is, and I never bothered to find out, so I don't know how it works. But this letter had a deep impact on me. It shouldn't have, but it did. I've been in this space long enough to know that racism exists in all forms and in all settings, that people take their cues from politicians, the shock jocks and tabloid media who successfully tap into fears and prejudice. We only have to switch on the TV, switch on the radio as well, the TV, and watch the rallies of extreme right groups and hear their hate speeches. I tell myself that no matter how often we have condemned racism, it's always questioned, and we are lectured on the need to do more, to appease some individual somewhere around the country, or to rescue some politician's career when signs of trouble at the polls emerge. Still, I was physically and emotionally sick for days after reading this letter. Now, more than ever, we seem to live in a world that thrives on absolutes, on generalisations, on binary and extreme rhetoric and dog whistle politics, where everything is being spun, where facts are optional, and we hear and read things like everyone's got to be on Team Australia. At least we heard it until Tony Abbott left. And we continue to see it, actually. It gained currency. Arabs are Muslims and Muslims are Arabs, and these are used interchangeably. We hear that Muslims or Arabs are terrorists. You are with us or against us, and if you're not with us, you are with the terrorists. We also hear that Arab and Muslim leaders are not doing enough, and that when we condemn terrorism, we should mean it. We also hear and read that Arab and Muslim women are oppressed and subservient to men. We also hear about young people who are labelled all as potential terrorists. We also hear that Arab and Muslim girls are forced into early marriages. As Arab Australian women, our experience of domestic violence, domestic and family violence, sexism, gender inequality, and so forth, is consistent with that of our sisters from all other communities. However, the propaganda about us being oppressed and subservient to men, and the well-meaning proclamations of concern about young girls being forced into early marriage are problematic and insulting. I believe that this kind of rhetoric is part of the broader racist and patronising narrative. It's the narrative of exclusion, the narrative that implies we are barbarians and our women and girls need rescuing. I also believe that had incidents of forced marriages emerged in the broader society, we would have just dealt with them without making them into headlines that demonise and lock out communities further. Of course, there is no denying the fact that there are oppressive practices, and I've heard of a couple of young girls who have been forced into early marriage. And these are totally deplorable, and we as an organisation challenge them without the headlines. The dilemma is, when we stereotype and label issues as cultural or religious, we exclude people from mainstream consideration. For instance, when an Arab woman experiences domestic violence, it's automatically explained as a cultural or religious issue rather than gender-based violence. Sadly, such biases are quite prevalent and tend to translate into approaches and at times policies which deny people's individual experience and excludes them from the mainstream even more, which only make matters worse. So the point I continue to make is this. When we make assumptions, we stereotype, we exclude, we come up with one-size-fits-all technical solutions which only serve to buy into the them and us rhetoric. And as such, we limit our ability to truly engage and connect with families, with young people, with women and children from vulnerable communities. We limit our ability to provide them with the relevant support and assistance they require to enable them to fully participate in society. And as such, the cycle of oppression and exclusion will go on. Now, I must say that our experience of racism is not unique to our community, of course, but is shared by many groups in Australia. And while details might be slightly different, the experience of exclusion and its catastrophic harm are just as profound. Now, while racism has been more strident and visual over the recent years, and the media appear to report it with increasing frequency, I acknowledge that increasingly people are standing up and speaking back against bigotry. We saw this in the overwhelming show of support that Adam Goodes has received following the racist bullying he copped a few months ago. And we saw it with I'll Ride With You hashtag that went viral. A great deal of goodwill and wisdom is clearly evident among the majority of Australians, and there are many working for justice and inclusion who consistently rise to support us and other communities. And I'm sure I know many people in this room who are doing just that. I also acknowledge and welcome the stark difference in tone and approach around the countering violent extremism issue shown by our new Prime Minister since taking up office. Prime Minister Turnbull's collaborative and inclusive language has created a space for the community to engage on solutions rather than to continue to push back against the demonising and fear-mongering narrative that had featured strongly over recent years. And I just want to make a couple more points about the community before I move on. Our community is quite diverse. We are people who come from 22 Arab countries, and approximately 65% of the people of Arab descent are Christians in Australia, and 35% are Muslims. It is quite a large community, with at least 500,000 Arab Australians, either born in one of the Arab countries or claim an Arab heritage. As an organisation, as I mentioned earlier, we stand for the whole, irrespective of country, religion or none, in addition to working inclusively across diversity. While much work had been undertaken by us and many others to combat and raise awareness of the consequences of racism and exclusion, there's much yet to be done. Now, I know that my talk is not directly talking about the children's services. Nevertheless, everything I'm saying, it affects people within our centres, within our organisations, within our institutions, everywhere we come from. And it does impact on all of us, actually, because we're part of this world. We're part of what we are hearing. It's that rhetoric that impacts on all of us. So I'm wondering, what keys to inclusive practice will you take from my presentation today? And what will you do differently when you go back to your own organisations, families and friends? But before you think or answer these questions, allow me to make some more points. When I reflect on my personal and professional experience, I've learned that on the big things, on the things that matter in life, like inclusion and inclusive practices, there's not one easy answer. I came up with a whole range of words and a whole range of things that we do, but we need persistence, we need authenticity, we need audacity, we need to be daring, we need creativity, consistency, flexibility, patience, compassion, passion, love, hope, lots of staying power, resilience and endurance, among many other things. I don't think any of us who truly care enough about where we are at or where we are heading as a society can do it any other way. And now let me just give you some more specific keys to inclusive practice. Now, if we are to start from the premise that inclusion is everyone's responsibility, we, of course, as change makers, as community workers, as childcare educators, as CEOs, as whatever, we all need to be challenging wherever we can see it. Too often, we need to be challenging prejudice, bias, exclusion, whatever we can see it, and racism and all the ills that come out of as a result of that kind of exclusive practice. Too often, social inclusion is portrayed as someone else's problem to fix. We look to someone in authority, we look to the government to fix it. Now, governments can create environment for inclusion, but as we have seen recently, they can also create an environment of exclusion. They can beat up fear, like it has happened recently. They can do that to suit their own political purpose. But generally, government are there to provide an environment where it's serving the entire nation or entire world is serving. But we look to them for that. But evidence has shown that only a joint, concerted effort by governments, businesses and communities will make a difference. In particular, those communities, be they communities of place, identity or issue, are often best able to identify and manage solutions. So exclusion is often played out very locally, and very locally is where social inclusion begins, not in Canberra or Macquarie Street. It needs to happen at a local base. My second key, my proposed key to all of you, if you want to take notes, engage and connect. Engage and connect. I can't say it often enough. Really engage and connect with communities. Think about the families, and you are working closely with families. You are the people there who are going to influence the families, who are going to influence the children. Think of families in their many forms. They are a very appropriate focus for building resilience to life's many challenges. Now, language, reflect on your language, reflect on everybody's language. Is it inclusive and respectful, or is it an us and them language? Use affirming, asset and strength-based language, and focus on people's gifts, abilities, skills and talents. And bring out your best in every situation, and I love this. Bring yourself, your whole being, all your energy, senses, your passion, your compassion, your creativity, your authenticity when connecting with another person and the people you work with. Imagine the impact you will have and how much you will learn from one another. Imagine the connections, the learnings, and the endless opportunities that you will create. Challenge your own biases, of course, that's the other point. And allow yourself to experience difference. We human beings have ingrained habits and ways of thinking, and our brains are hardwired to our own unique experience, and we tend to respond to situations from that particular prism. But it's not all stuck. It's not permanent, really. We can change it. We can create new neural pathways by opening ourselves up to new experiences and by reinforcing those experiences. It doesn't have to be the old ways of doing things. And always, always ask for support along the way to do just that. And turn your ideas into action. Remember, inclusion is a practice, not a concept. And what have you identified that needs to change? You're going to have to think about that. And so you can have more inclusive practice. Who are your partners? Who will you collaborate with? Where's the community in this? The other thing, challenge organisational culture. Go deep inside your own organisations. Always reflecting, checking and questioning how can we do it more inclusively. Always support each other. Ask for external support from coaches, mentors, through training, partnerships, collaborators and the likes. And the final point is you can always go back to basics. How accessible are your practices, your policies and services? Do any of your practices or policies inadvertently exclude some groups or communities? This is Access and Equity 101. As you know, this means understanding the needs and issues affecting diverse communities. communicating in appropriate language, having specialised services when needed, and engaging the people you work with and the children you work with. So these are only some of my keys to inclusion. The list can be endless, truly, and I'll be here all day listing them. So we need everything, okay? We need practically almost everything that who we are. But if we bring ourselves into that space with, from a point of courage and from a point of being authentic, I think we will get somewhere. If we work together, we will get somewhere as well. So I truly hope that you'll consider some of what I suggested, and you can take them inside your own organisation and beyond, along with this final message. We as change makers, community workers, childcare workers, educators, health workers, public servants, CEOs, and all other leaders that I haven't mentioned here, have a responsibility to articulate and shape a society that truly works for all. And we would need to think about and consider doing things differently, not to be stuck in the old ways than we had up until now. We need to put a system in place that for consistently acting from courage, creativity and authenticity, instead of worries, doubts, fears, and working in silos. We can only do this if we work collaboratively and support one another, and only then we are able to create a society that has a place for everyone, a society that believes we are part of the whole, and if you hurt one, you hurt everyone. So thank you very much. I wish you all peace, salam, pray, freedom, and in all other languages of the world. Thank you.